Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here today. It's an absolute honor to be sharing this space and to share my life's work with all of you. So today we'll be discussing, and over the course of the next 3 evenings, the nature-based maps of the psyche. Tonight we'll be looking at the cartography of the human spirit, charting our inner territory via the 4 directions, working with the dream body, and bringing that into nature. Tomorrow we'll be working with the archetype of birth and death, and how this initial drama in the world sets the tone and illustrates the holographic nature of the universe. And on the final evening, we'll be exploring the arcane practice of alchemy through a Jungian lens, how to conduct inner process to bring about inner and outer transformation. I've titled these lectures The Revitalization of the Collective Soul because we are coming towards the end of an age which began roughly 400 years ago with the Enlightenment, in which the light of reason or rationality or the intellect grew to dominance in what we describe as consciousness. We become divorced from every other definition of what consciousness can mean and have attached it to the relational ego that is now speaking to you. The me, Michael, who was born in a certain year and time, who has parents here speaking up here to those seated there. But as many people in this room no doubt are aware, that is not the only mode of consciousness that there is. And in fact, this is a very limited level of consciousness. Among these human credentials that I have, I also consider my staff here something that was bestowed to me by nature. And this was a very intuitive process. This was a falling in love, if you will. And there's a very particular valley out west of Austin where I lived next to it, and during that time I was spending a great deal of time just being out there and really coming to know this beautiful, wonderful valley and this piece of the Texas Hill Country, roughly 2.5 miles away from the place where I was born. And through my explorations there, from just coming to know this valley as one would come to know a lover, I was able to see her change through her seasons. I came to know her fauna, her mushrooms, her plants, and I just found immense joy, connection, and reinvigoration of my spirit from being there. And I came upon this staff. It was May 2021. I've been working with my spiritual guide, my therapist, for a number of years, and he told me to go and look for a staff. And I asked him, "Why is that, Theo?" He said, "Well, every wizard needs one." And so, not 2 weeks after that, I was walking through my favorite valley on my favorite trail, and that staff was leaning up against a tree on the path that I almost always take. Had been there the entire time, and yet here it was waiting for me on that very particular day. So, as we come into this new era and this new phase of understanding what it is that we are, because we've been very mired in the solar element of our consciousness and what Stan Groff refers to as the hylotropic, or the picking apart, because the sun sees with its very bright rays and discerns concrete objects and things. This has gotten us very far, technologically speaking, but it has also divorced us from the very deep roots of love and power that is our birthright. And when we solidify into that consciousness, and when we are so attached to that, we become fractured. We become split off from the rest of our consciousness, from the rest of who we are. And I'll speak a little bit about my own experience with that, because it is all here present with us. And the way that this fractured me was that I was overly invested and overly attached and could see nothing really beyond my own physical ego awareness, which gets us into a lot of trouble. So, with that curiosity that was really fostered by parents and school and society, I grew very attached to my academic achievements, particularly being able to do well in school without really trying. That was really, really important for me. And it worked for a good while. Like I said, I went to university, completely funded by scholarships. And yet, the shift that happened when I went to university, the leaving home, the abundance of freedom that comes with that, the increased responsibility of actually taking a rigorous course of study, was a lot to integrate. And I struggled a great deal with that. And because I was so attached to that image and not so invested in working with the moment and being in the moment and evolving, well, I ran into what we refer to as mental illness. I became very depressed and battled with this over the course of 2 years. By the time I was a junior in college, I'd been struggling with depression for about 2 years. I'd been struggling with suicidal ideation for about the same time. And for about 6 months up until one October evening in 2014, I was thinking about killing myself every day, to the point where I was praying for death, praying that I wouldn't wake up each night, and mourning the fact that I'd woken up each day. And so, this brought me to what I consider a logical conclusion and the logical mindset, which was that if I could not change, if I could not fulfill this role of mine, that I must be unworthy of even life itself, that I deserve to die. And so, one evening in October, I was sitting underneath my desk, and I had a knife right here in the corner of my elbow. And I didn't want to die. I really didn't. I was terrified. But there was another voice inside of me that was saying, "You fucking coward. Why can't you do this? Just drag it down the length of your arm, and it'll all be over. Your pitiless life will be gone." And so I was, tearful, sobbing. And then the phone rang above my desk. I was, kind of huddled underneath. And it was my father. And every single time my father has called me before or since this time, it's always a jubilant occasion. "Hey, Pancho, how's it going?" He's always excited to hear from me. But this evening, however, he had a really depthful sorrow in his voice. And he said, "Hey, is everything okay? How are you?" And I said, "I'm not really doing too well." And he said, "I cannot explain this, but I had this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I knew I had to call you." And then he did all the things that a great supportive father does, which is, "You can get through this. I will support you in any way that you need to be supported. I love you. I'm here for you." And all those things that he said were wonderful and magical. But the thing that broke through to me was I had this feeling and I acted on it. And as a scientist and as a natural philosopher, I had just been given a piece of evidence that I could not reconcile with and that I could not simply sweep under the rug. To me, this was the sign that an intelligence far greater than my own, something that interpenetrated every level of reality, that was infinitely compassionate and actually really cared about me in a way that I could not comprehend, especially at the time, had reached out, had put this feeling in my father's stomach, the intuition to act, and had pulled me out of this stupor that I was living in. And so the fracture started to be healed. And since that time, I've learned many wonderful things. And the basis of what we're going to be talking about tonight is that we are an ecology. We are not separate individual little beings here on this planet. This is not a random act. This is not something that happened purely by chance from a billiard ball game set in motion 14 billion years ago. There's intention behind it. There's love behind it, because what is consciousness if but the desire to know, as I so desire to know and fall in love with the world? And so, by using a nature-based map of the psyche, by being out in nature and doing our work there, by recognizing that she can speak to us in our own words, in fact, or in images, is what I hope to convey to you. And I hope that you're able to leave here today with a stronger sense of that relationship, and also with the tools to be able to keep fostering that relationship. Because, as opposed to our hylotropic solar consciousness, there is our holotropic lunar consciousness. And I'll be using the terms masculine and feminine kind of interchangeably with all of these terms throughout. But the lunar consciousness, it sees more of the connections between everything. It is holotropic, moving towards wholeness. And the best maps for that are our directions, our dreams, and our bodies, which are, of course, the human incarnations of nature. And so we've already discussed this. These are the next 3 evenings tonight: Cartography of the Human Spirit, the trauma and drama of birth and how it informs the first half of our lives, tomorrow evening. And the final evening, bringing it all together, hoping to make a grand synthesis, a grand alchemy, a little witch's brew of all of these things on the final evening on Saturday. And again, thank you all for being here. It really is an honor to see so many of you. So without further ado, let us start discussing how we can start mapping our inner territory with the 4 directions. And what I love about this is that the connections between the directions, between the seasons, between the times of day, the elements, they all just kind of fit together and they make sense. And I hope to drive that home with a prayer. To the direction of the north, to the hour of midnight, to the season of winter, the element of earth, and the spirit of the rabbit. We ask that when the night is darkest and the winter coldest, that we remember that which holds most strongly in our values, that even though we may be lost, the North Star is shining, and we may find our way and know that the dawn is coming. And so it is. Aho. To the direction of the east, to the hour of dawn, to the season of spring, to the element of air, and the spirit of the condor. May we remember to hold the hills and valleys of our lives with a light touch, an element of laughter. May we know that everything that happens in our lives is but a temporary manifestation of the internal dance of spirit. May we tread through this life lightly, and may our play be the laughter of the heights. And so it is. Aho. To the direction of the south, the hour of midday, the season of summer, the element of fire, and the spirit of the serpent. May we meet each moment with full embodied feeling. May we meet our fear as the warrior meets his in battle. And may we thrust our spear with all of the skill and presence that we are capable of. And may we move over the ground of our lives as the serpent does. And so it is. Aho. and to the direction of west, to the season of twilight, to the hour of twilight, to the season of autumn, the element of water, and the spirit of the fish. May we remember the mycelial dark. May we delight in the death and decay that makes life possible. May we brew our potions and delve into the shadows where light fears to tread. And may we delve deep into the waters, as does the whale, and so it is. Aho. And so there should be an understanding of how all of these things are connected. So I would love the audience's participation at this point to say, what are some attributes that you see to the north? Wind. What about the wind?
Moves without resistance.
Beautiful.
Mountains.
Mountains. Earth.
Guidance, direction.
Guidance and direction. Beautiful. Element of earth, right? It stays true. It holds firm. Growth. Beautiful. Light. It is those things that we have to remember that are outside of us. Our North Star. Beautiful. What about the East?
Sunrise.
Right, when we have insights, how does it come to us? It
Dawn.
dawns. Exactly.
Divinity.
Divinity. That's beautiful. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Warmth? Yeah, laughter, right? Play. The condor flies high. It remembers that it is the part of us that is above it all. Because all the while we're going through our motions. We have a triumph, and we feel great. And we have a defeat, and we feel terrible. And the witness just watches it all lovingly. It is a part of us that is outside of death that will watch that moment too, as it does every single moment. In the South. What calls to mind from the South?
Rage.
Rage.
Music.
Deep.
Music. Did I hear deep?
Yes.
Depth? Yes. From the root. That's where it comes from. The warrior's heart. Fearing nothing. Whereas the East stays above it all, the warrior is right there. It is placing the knife into the enemy's belly. It is feeling all of the rage. It is feeling all of the fear. It is the part of us that delights in being embodied, that meets with full presence, that savors the food, that savors the water, that savors the fucking. Right here. Nowhere else. What about the West?
Rest.
Rest, meditation,
Letting go.
letting go. Human?
Going to sleep.
Sleep, indeed. World of the dreams. The esoteric, the mystical, the magical, the alchemical. Beautiful. Yes, this is the realm of the magician, the West. And the twilight is when the spirit world and our world overlap. as we descend into night. So we're going to look at each part of ourselves from each one of these directions, because when you ask most people to draw a tree, they'll draw this half of it because of what you can see. It's obvious, right? And yet, the thing that makes great trees be able to stand tall is the roots that go just as deep as the tree stands tall. As Carl Jung said, this is a beautiful fucking quote, "No tree can reach to heaven unless its roots extend down to hell." And this is one of the beautiful parts of being human, is that we get to embrace and embody all of these things in a synthesis, because we are not just love and light. We are not just goodwill. We're selfish. We're brutal. Throughout our history, we have dominated and raped and killed each other off by the millions. And nobody escapes it. It is part and parcel of being here and breathing. What are we? Are we above the psyche? Are we above the universe? And we'll go into this later on, but working with your dreams, you'll see all of these figures emerge, these different parts of you. And just as nature is a map of our unconscious, because it doesn't have the intention that we have, we're disconnected in that way. We sit on top of nature, and by that I don't mean that we're superior to it. I mean that we rest upon it, and I mean that all of the levels that are underneath us are fundamental. Because the top of the pyramid does not get to be the top of the pyramid because it is the top of the pyramid. And this is exactly what we say when we are dominated by our ego consciousness. We say, yep, rationality, it is the absolute best, and everything else is a pure accident and is under our will. But without it, without the molecules, without the organisms, without the grand ecology that we are a part of, all of the microorganisms, the trees, the wind, the earth, the animals, everything playing its part, we are nothing. And we're being met with that fact as our earth descends into chaos, divorced from these roots. And so, here it is, folks. It's actually very simple, and I love it. This is the three-dimensional map of the psyche as conceived of by Bill Plotkin, an eco-psychologist living in Colorado. And so you'll see on the top here, on the outside of the circle, we have our archetypes. We have the ideal versions of ourself. In the north, our nurturing generative adult, the North Star, the one that says, "Don't worry, child, it's going to be okay. I've got you." In the east, we have the innocent, the sage, the sacred fool, the trickster, the one that knows it's all a big game. That's all a cosmic joke. This is the one that, this is the fool in the king's court, right? When the king takes himself too seriously, he gets up on the table and rips a fart. You're taking yourself too seriously, king. Don't you remember what your role is? You are not the king archetype. You play it. You're here for us. In the south, we have the wild indigenous one, the warrior, the one that knows every path and crevice and animal trail, the one that knows the tools of their trade, that knows their way around the knife, around the pen, around the potions. That's more the domain of the wizard. We'll get to that one. But this is the one that fully meets experience, that is totally present. In the West, One of my favorite ones, I love the way he says this, the dark muse beloved. This is the old crone archetype. This is the one that goes off by themselves into the woods and doesn't emerge for years, that goes into the cave and grabs all of the delectable little decaying delights, the mugwort, the wart of the toad, the tail of the rabbit, and concocts her potions. That dances with death and decay as the East dances with light and awareness. And so these are our ideals. These are the parts of our psyche that are incredibly mature, the ones that we're working towards trying to embody. And the ones of the inner circle are our sub-personalities. They're split off aspects of our own consciousness. And they operate in the shadow. And you can usually only detect them through feeling, through broadening your awareness, and through seeing how you interact with the rest of the field. Other people, namely relationships, are very important for this, and your relationship to yourself. So in the north, we have our loyal soldiers. These are the ones that have been fighting battles that have long since ended. They're so afraid of what has happened to us in the past that now, even though the war is over, they continue to fight. This happened in the post-World War II era with the Japanese, who were stationed on many islands and were cut off from contact, some of them persisting even decades afterwards. The loyalty of Bushido is pretty legendary. And the Japanese did exactly what you're supposed to do with loyal soldiers, which is you treat them tenderly. You say, thank you for your loyalty to our country, to this kingdom. But the war is over, and we have a place for you. And we want to welcome you back to the society and to the community with open arms, worthy of a soldier's welcome. In the East, we have our escapists and addicts, because at the root of all of our addictions is a spiritual quest, whether we know it or not. Because it's the parts of us that get high, right? These are the ones that, and what happens when you indulge your addiction? Don't you feel pretty okay with it all for a moment? Until, of course, the toll starts to build up and you can never really get that same feeling. It's because we're trying to fulfill a spiritual aim through a material means. And the escapists are very similar. They just say it's not there. Oh yeah, that pain and trauma, yeah, it's fine. I meditated my way out of that. I did 6 ayahuasca ceremonies and now I'm good. Don't have any more work to do. I'm just totally present. These are the classic spiritual bypasser, yeah. And again, doing this out of pain, of not wanting to confront the pain. In the South, we have our wounded children. Those parts of us that are trying to get their needs met, but we don't know how to quite articulate how to do that. And so, we do this through immature means, yeah. Every single one of us does this. And the best place to look for this, because it brings out the deepest aspects of what our needs are, is romantic partnership. This is where we will often most compromise ourselves, not ask for what we need out of fear or out of pain. But just because we don't ask for it consciously doesn't mean that we don't ask for it in some other way unconsciously. So you come home, you could have said, you know, darling, could you really take care of dinner this week? I'm really swamped. I can't do it this week. You could have said that. But instead, you wanted to be the everything. You wanted to be the all. You didn't want to admit vulnerability, whatever it was. And so you say nothing. And you're stressed out and you're overworked. And you go to the grocery store and you make dinner. And you're resentful. You're going to bed with all of this, knowing that you could have said something, but you didn't. And now it's going to come out in some other way, either in an outburst, when you least mean it or expect it to. It's going to happen. And in the West, we have the shadow, the proverbial shadow. And of course, all of these aspects are shadow elements because they operate outside of consciousness, but by this definition of the shadow, what we mean is those parts of us that we identify as not us. So I'll use myself as an example here. If you identify a lot as a good guy, as a savior, as a white knight, your shadow is going to get activated by other people that display the attributes that you are not willing to take. That hopeless self-sacrifice. Oh my God, can you believe that guy? He totally asks for what he wants and puts himself out there. My God. Fuck that guy. That's a great way to find your shadow characteristics. Who the fuck triggers you? Who activates you? Who do you get upset at for no reason? Another great way to do that is take all the things that you identify as. What's the opposite of that? It's pretty simple. But in addition to the things that are so either disagreeable or grotesque or whatever, there's also the golden aspect of the shadow. Those things that we deem too good to identify as, that we might contaminate with our own humanness or our own badness. And these are partially the archetypes that we see here. But it's grand compassion. It's just imagine your highest ideal and what it would take to truly embody that. And you'll see the reasons why we cut ourselves off from it. Using this cartography here, I want you to look at each of your directions and plot within yourself, what are your highest values? What keeps you warm when the night is really dark? Who is your sage like? Try to imagine these figures in your psyche, these aspects of you. I always like to imagine like a royal pair for the north. My sage is, shaved head, robes, that sort of thing. South, a painted warrior. But it could be anything that you want. Start tapping into these aspects of yourself. List them out. Put a face to them. You can even embody them if you'd like. We'll get more on that in dream body work, but let's take that time. All right, y'all, let's get back to it. So there were two great questions that came up during that period. The first was, in what ways do we see the directions really embodied in the world that we live in? So if we take, for example, the East, the Orient, China, India, Tibet, all of these areas is really where a lot of our kind of world mystical traditions are, where our firmly rooted contemplative traditions are. All come from the East. Olivia also made the wonderful observation that the east sides of town tend to be the more places where a lot of the addicts will gather. And here in the West, our nation, there's a great deal of dark magician energy, a lot of manipulation, a use of technology that is not connected to nature, that actually dominates over nature, much in the same way that Saruman did in the Two Towers by ripping out all of the forests for his own power, for his own sovereignty. And we see that through planned obsolescence, through rampant consumerism, through algorithms that just want to soak up our attention. In the South, which I feel is very much embodied by the continent of Africa, the West has projected its collective shadow onto. and demonized and torn away. The indigenous body demonized sexuality, ancestral ways of knowing, connection to the land. And in the North, I don't really know. I don't know who that would be.
The Swiss.
The Swiss?
The South has brought the beautiful heat of sexuality too.
I love that.
The people down south tend to be more fun.
Yeah.
The North is the kind Canadians.
Canadians.
Are really friendly.
How are you doing?
They are friendly. They're losing their way a little bit, I think. But I guess in that regard, they do show us that friendliness and compassion can be a way. And the other was, how do we start to work with these different aspects of ourselves? And to that extent, one, you have to start to relate to them as if they are, because they are, actual autonomous energies within you. And so you need to find out where the North resides in your body, where the East resides, what are the things that make those parts of yourself come alive. I have suggestions, but this is an individual journey. The North is going to be the aspect of you that is a leader, that is directing not only, you can be part of an organization, but ultimately, as far as you are concerned, you have to be able to direct the different parts of yourself to fulfill the things that you like to do. So you should have some sort of direction. Even if the direction changes, even if the goal changes, you should have something that you're aiming towards. Otherwise, you're just kind of firing randomly, right? So you can develop this through developing your leadership skills, through developing your voice, through commanding, but not shadowing, not manipulation, but knowing what the other parts of yourself are talented at. This is what I was telling Gretchen during the break, was that the royal pair, the king and queen of your psyche, they are intimately tied and know the other archetypes well. And for them, please gift me with your gift, is the message of the king, the message of the queen. So when he needs his advisor, the king calls on the sage, the one that sees the grand picture. When they need creation, they look to the magician. They look to the old crone in her laboratory, stewing together all of her potions. When the kingdom is threatened by war, they call on the south. And as you start to work with these different parts of yourself, I highly recommend using the times of day and the seasons that we're in as ways to kind of deepen this process. So we're heading into autumn right now. And so it's a ripe time to really delve into the magician, to the old crone, to the shadow. Especially now that the sun is not so brutal. And you can kind of see this too. I feel very intimately tied to the land here, perhaps because I was born here, perhaps because I've cemented ties through the valley and the magic that I've been working there. But last year, I don't know how many of y'all were around last year, but last summer was blissful. It barely ever got above 100. There was a lot of rain, and that valley was just full of water the whole summer, as well as the green belt and everything. And I very much felt that my life mirrored that. My life felt very lush. This summer it was very dry. The green belt hasn't had water in it for months. Never mind the valley. The valley's been bone dry. And I very much felt that in my own being. Felt like I was getting by on very little, like the creatures of the desert. But it was a moment, or it was a period of intense baking, yeah? The heat of the summer sun, not at midday. That's where you can really break through a lot of your south. Because what does it do? It stirs you up, fires you up. In fact, murder rates go up during the summer when it's hotter. to train your east, and we'll talk about being with all of these parts, but things that you can do to train all of these aspects of yourself. With the east, I highly recommend improv comedy, taking things lightly, not taking yourself too seriously. Meditation, it's an obvious one. Any sort of spiritual pursuit. Anything that helps you to drop into your witness, into that part of you that sits outside of time, that was there before the beginning and that will survive after the end. In the South, that's being embodied, so anything that you can do to be embodied. Tantric practices, working out, warrior training, boxing, martial arts. Embodying your voice, speaking from your belly. And in the West is the best, in my opinion. I mean, a wizard for Christ's sake, but that's the part of you where you get to embrace like all of the fucking weird, wacky aspects of you. And it's very particular to you. And so that's the one that's the most exploratory, the one that's most gracious towards all of those parts of you that just other people probably aren't going to understand. And if they do, you should hold on to them.
Welcome the weird in the West.
Welcome the weird. And so just feel into these different parts of yourself as you're sitting in meditation at dawn. And you will feel that part of yourself be very present with you. You will definitely feel it in the heat of the midday in the summer. So this all feels pretty real, right? Right here, right now. You sitting there, I'm up here, you're looking at me. You have a sense of yourself and like how you got here and what you ate earlier and stuff like that. Feels very real, right? So, how many times have you dreamt and seen something utterly bizarre and fantastic and said like, yep, that's totally happening right here, right now. There's a 6-headed bear heading straight toward me, and I need to run the fuck away from that. Right? You generally don't question it. I don't know. You guys tell me. If that doesn't feel real to you all the time, then you got a good leg up. But that's the thing, is that when we're going into our dreams, we're generally doing the same things that we do all the time, which is believing that everything is real, including the projections that we put on other people, including our victim. And the Tibetan practice of dream yoga is to awaken in your dream so that you can awaken in real life and realize that you are also dreaming as you're awake, that we're all dreaming this reality together. Now, there's 2 principal ways that dream work is done. The first, of course, is the kind of standard analytic interpretation, where you look for archetypal motifs, links to mythology. You look at, it's like reading a novel or watching a movie and looking at what the images are saying behind that. And I'll give an example here in a moment. That can be very, very useful, especially if you're intellectually identified, like I am, because when the ego gets a hold of something that is relevant to it and that is interested in and can shift its perspective, it's very good, because then it can start to deepen into these things. And so when you have a good understanding of what the motifs are and how they relate to you, and this is very important to understand as well, is that in the dream, there's no concrete meaning behind what is happening. It is all contextually dependent. So you may have a dream, derive a meaning from it, and then 5 years later revisit that dream and see new meanings emerge from it. The danger with this mode of doing dream work is that it can intellectually distance you from the elements that exist in your dream. Because all of those figures that you interact with, all of the beasts, all of the structures, the environments, all of that is actually energies that exist somewhere in your body. And when you start to work with these things, you'll notice them emerge. So to give an example of these 2 different modes of interpretation, I had this dream about a year ago. And when you're working with your process, when you're working with dreams in this way, you want to speak the dream as if it's happening right now. You want to enter back into that space. And so you'll speak it as if it's happening. And so I'm walking through the streets of San Francisco. It's night, and I'm walking with a former partner of mine. We're walking towards where our car is parked at a parking garage nearby. And we're walking through the streets. There's a lot of people around. And this young black man, maybe 23 or so, comes to me. And he has this very certain look in his eye. And he comes up to me and he starts to shove me. He says, "Hey, you owe me." I say, "I have no idea what you mean, man. I think you got me confused with someone else." He gets angrier. "No, you owe me. Motherfucker, I said you owe me." And he takes me, he throws me against a wall. And there's a lot of people walking around. They don't seem to notice. There's even a policeman, and I think, oh, maybe the policeman can help me. But the policeman is 3.5 feet tall. And this man is looking at me. His eye is very, very solid. He's kind of twitching a little bit, so I think he might be on meth. And then he sticks something in my chest. I feel him poking me right here. I say, "Whoa, okay. Like, whatever we need to do here. Like, please don't do this. I don't want to get hurt. What do you need?" And the dream ends. So the interpretation part of that would be to look at what was happening there. So it's a young black man. It's a shadow figure. I owe him something. I don't know quite what. What do I owe him? There's an authority figure, but the authority figure is useless, has no power. And I forget to mention this, the thing that he was poking into my heart, which I thought was a knife, which I think is a knife, is actually just a harmless little plastic comb. Very important symbol there. So interpreting that, I would say, so he really didn't want to hurt me at all. He wanted to get my attention. And have my attention he did when he poked that thing into my chest. Now, the other way that you can work with that dream is to take the person that is interacting with you in the dream. So instead of saying like, "Oh, this is a young black man, he is a shadow figure of mine," I actually sit and I start to speak with him. I allow him to take over my body like I did when I was portraying the dream. Hey, you owe me. I keep saying that. Start to let him come in. Actually speak to him. Let him speak through me. What do you need? What do I owe you? Do you see me? Do you see what's happened to me? I've been out here alone all of this time with no nurturing generative adult to look after me. Do you see what happened? I am addicted to drugs and out here on the street, alone. And then I knew that this was Mikey. This is my little boy who had been left all alone for many years out on the streets, had to fend for himself. And now I had the opportunity to try and make a repair. And the way that I did that particular day was to make a wildflower bouquet and tie it together with grass and leave it in a particular spot on the land. And that's one of the most beautiful ways to work with your dreams, to give the dreams something in return for the messages that they give you. And the more that you can weave it in with what is happening in the dream, the better. Make it an artistic process. It could be a drawing, it could be a song, it could be lighting a candle. But you want to communicate to that side of your psyche that you are listening and that you believe that what it has to share is important. Because I guarantee you, when you make that solid leap and you look at your dreams, they know. That side of your psyche knows, oh, you're listening now. Okay. Well, good, because I have something to say to you. Lots of things to say to you, actually. And in the same way, we can work with all of the different aspects of our psyche that we've been talking about. When we are in need of a higher perspective, we can walk with our sage. How can I hold this moment lightly? When we don't know what to do, we can tap into our king or our queen, who knows exactly where we're supposed to go. And the more that you start to be creative with this process, our energies come out through many means. One of them is thoughts. And that's where a lot of our energy will come out, is through thoughts. And because we're so used to being in that mode, we have to be able to, or it benefits us greatly to be able to switch the channel, if you will. So if you're stuck somewhere, say that you're depressed, and you're feeling that energy emerge as heaviness in your body, and you're feeling that emerge as thoughts of, wow, I'm such a piece of shit, I could be doing so much better, I could be doing something else, but here I am just sulking, you can start to switch the channel a little bit, because those ones aren't working. Okay, so what's the feeling? I feel heavy. Feels like there's a weight on top of me. Okay, so start to intensify that. Get something heavy and put it on you. Feel like you're stuck. Imagine that you're stuck in between a very narrow space. And then you can switch the channel again and say, I'm so stuck. Whatever the feeling of stuckness feels like to you, embody it in a sound. Because as you start to do that, then the energy starts to move. Instead of just coming out through thoughts and coming out through that body expression, you're filtering it through all the different technologies of your body. And that creates movement. And that allows the energy to come out and to be expressed. And it will generally start to intensify. And as long as you stay with the process, this is a practice, because and I'm speaking from my own experience because I love being up here, is that the intellect will start to remark on what's going on. And it will say like, oh wow, like the energy is moving, or this trauma is starting to be expressed, fantastic. And that could take you out of the way, right? You're now one thought behind reality and behind feeling. And so it's just a practice, it's gonna happen. But as long as you keep switching the channel, as long as you work in whatever feels right, it'll start to move. At a very, the core dominant personality in me besides my own is one that I call Marcus. And he is a grim mask with a mace that sprouts out of his head like a flower. And he is the part of me that absolutely thinks I'm wretched. And how I was able to express him, how I was able to move through him and de-embody from him, was I was sitting with a friend who helped me through this process. And immediately, my abs contracted as if I had a Charlie horse. And I screamed, ah! And that energy moved through it. My abs relaxed. Tied around the solar plexus, right? Around that seat of power. And my friend, being a very Christian woman, was invoking the right of Christ to remove Marcus, to force him to leave. And he laughed. He laughed at her. And so it was a process of playing. It was just play. It really was just play. Yeah, it had massive consequences for me as a human being. And so I just tightened up my muscles. I didn't allow him further into my body. I gave out this like really grotesque burp that felt like it had been there for 10 years. And by the end of that process, I haven't felt the same sort of depraved, masochistic voice in me, which I hope is showing through this lecture that we're all involved in here. But these are the two different ways that you can start to work with your dreams. One, through interpretation, through understanding, through coming to know more about yourself and using knowing as a means to grow, and also coming directly into a relationship with it. So with that, I would love the opportunity to have someone from the audience come up, anyone that would be willing to be recorded, to describe a dream and see if we can work with that dream. You got one, Olivia? Okay. I just want you to drop into like just a mindful space. And like we did earlier, tell the dream as if it's happening.
Okay. So it's like 5 a.m. and I'm kind of in and out of this dream state. And every time I slip into the dream state, I'm seeing the same vivid image of a woman with striking blue eyes standing in the middle of the desert. And as the dream is commencing, or as like it's commencing around me, this big dust storm starts to appear, and it's like completely like swirling around her, and she's just staring directly into my eyes, and I get the impression that she's staring into her own eyes, and she's just remaining completely calm throughout this, completely grounded, completely solid in her stance, while the whole world around her is completely going insane. And then out of the dust emerges 5 figures standing right next to her. So there's like guides, like 2 men and 3 girls that stand right next to her. And her eyes close, and then they like pop back open, and I just hear this voice that says, even in the midst of the storm, you can find peace. And it's just like repeating. Mm-hmm. And I would like wake up and then go back in, and it would be the same thing replaying over and over. And I had the impression that it was supposed to be turned into like a guided meditation for the journeys that I do. I don't know, but it was interesting.
Beautiful. Okay. So if you're looking at that dream as if it were a tapestry or a large painting, is there a theme that emerges?
Chaos and tranquility.
Mm-hmm. What's a way that you can bring this woman with the striking blue eyes into your body? How can you embody her in this moment?
Through breath.
Mm. Would you do that? And just keep doing that as the dust is blowing all around you. Come here, Oliver. Even in the calm of in the chaos of the storm, you can find peace. What does she want you to know? What is she calling you towards? You can ask her.
The knowing of being guided and protected, always supported. That peace is something that is created within and can be accessed at any moment.
Do you feel that she is you?
I don't feel like she's me.
Do you feel like you could be her?
Yes, I do. I felt like more so that it was like a message that I was to give to her. And then, like a few days later, I did a journey with a girl who had the same color hair and striking blue eyes and was going through massive like chaos in her life. And I did that, turned it into a guided meditation for her.
So you embodied her already?
Yeah, it was almost like a apparition or something
Beautiful.
of what was to come. Yeah.
Dreams can be very premonitory like that. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we give a hand for Olivia, please? So that's a very, very powerful image. While it definitely embodies aspects of the North, this seems like a very well-rounded and integrated character. She also has the crone, the sage, and the embodiment. And we could have explored further with the different figures that were there. You said it was 2 men and 3 women? 3 women besides her?
Yeah, there were 5.
5 figures, 6 with her and 7 for you. Okay. Interesting. But yeah, that's a way that you can be artistic with your dreams, with, like I was doing, letting them into your body, mimicking what they were doing in your dreams, holding that firm gaze, knowing that everything is going to be okay, rising above the chaos of the storm. And also just that immense, extraordinary power that is deep within you.